Good Lord. Look at the size of this thing. I bought this. Why? I mean, isn't it just essentially Descent 2.0, but with a Star Wars thematic overlay? So when I first heard about Star Wars Imperial Assault, I was a bit confused. I didn't understand what a dungeon crawl has to do with Star Wars. But then I heard people start to talk about it, saying it was the greatest thing to happen to Star Wars since The Empire Strikes Back. I saw it on shelves, I picked it up. It's got heft, people! I turned it around and then I saw all the pretty bits inside. It practically begged the question.
What's in the box?
Alright, let's have a look and see what's inside. Sorry. Alright, so let's take a peek here at what's inside. Lift the lid on this bad boy. Okay, so first things first, you'll see a promotional sheet for the figure packs included in this base set, plus also the ones that are coming in the future. You've got an updated Fantasy Flight Games 2014 catalog. You have a quick start rules learn to play guide, a campaign guide which gives you all the details of the scenario. You've got a rules reference guide, basically a glossary for most of the game's important concepts. You have a skirmish guide which allows you to play the game not unlike the Star Wars miniatures game that came out a few years ago. And then you have tiles, lots and lots of tiles and tokens. Underneath we have some identifying stickers to break the different squads up. We have the Luke and Vader pack which comes with this base set. You have a bunch of character cards. You also have lots of other different types of cards, plenty of them. The beautiful custom dice, plus some stand-ups, which basically allow you to stand up your doors and whatnot. But then, underneath, you have more. Yes, that's right. You have a ATST, which comes disassembled that you have to put together. And then all the other miniatures included in the game, of which there are plenty. So let's take a closer look at some of these components in detail. Here's the figure pack information sheet, side 1, which like I said is included in the game, and side 2, which is what's coming soon. We've got a custom ATST with General Weiss, IG-88, Royal Guard Champion, some Rebel Troopers, Han Solo, Rebel Saboteurs, and of course Chewbacca. And here's one of the more recent Fantasy Flight catalogs, which are included in the newer games. So Fantasy Flight continues to impress with its sheer variety of different titles. Now you can get into the game pretty quickly just by using the Learn to Play Quick Start rules, but once you've digested the rules, you have this fantastic little rules reference guide, which, as I said before, is kind of like a glossary of all the important rules. If you need like additional details, some clarifications on some of the more important rules, then this one's going to be indispensable. It's a fantastic guide to the more important rules of the game. Clear, concise, and extremely well laid out as well too, with plenty of line of sight examples and movement examples. As I mentioned, the Learn to Play guide, another example of Fantasy Flight's fantastic production values. All the different components are clearly indicated. You've got a quick tutorial about the rules, and also some additional core rules, which are part and parcel with the main gameplay. And then finally they introduce you very, very economically, very, very efficiently to the more advanced rules as well too. So this, like I said, is more than enough to get you into the game pretty much right away. Next up is the crown jewel of the whole thing, which is the campaign guide, and this is what's really going to give you the thematic relevance of the game. So it starts with like a nice little opening crawl, and then details all the different scenarios that the Imperial player will be privy to, all of the information required to set the map up, where the figures go, where the things like storage containers go, and various other objectives as well. It's just another great example of beautiful layout, great organization by Fantasy Flight, and their manuals really are just startlingly well put together. Very, very impressed by this. Also, this is kind of clever on the back side of the campaign guide, is actually a campaign log. So the great thing about the game is that it is kind of features essentially what amounts to a persistent campaign through several separate games. You're recording wins and losses, and that's literally affecting a storyline that you're developing during the course of several games played together. These logs help you keep track of experience for your certain characters, experience for the Empire's characters, the results of each scenario, and how it's going to affect the next scenario, and how the whole thing plays out in the end. If playing an objective is just a little bit too brain-busting for you at the time, and you just want to straight-up fight, you can actually refer to the skirmish guide here, and basically pimp out an army for yourself and play against an opponent. All the rules contained right there. Here you have the 6 different Rebel hero character sheets that come with the game, and these are all double-sided, because what happens is eventually your character is going to get wounded and won't be quite as effective as they were at the beginning of the scenario. In the very first scenario, just to give you an example, one of the Empire's goals is to attempt to flip all the Rebels' hero sheets to the wounded side, and that's what they look like when they're flipped to the wounded side. Then you've got the Imperial deployment cards, which have a backing that looks like this, and they include various enemies, Imperial enemies from the Star Wars trilogy. We've got stormtroopers of a couple of differing difficulty levels, Royal Guards in 2 different challenge levels, Imperial officers, probe droids, and the E-Web engineer. Now in addition to that too, you've got essentially the boss monsters. So you've got an ATST, you've got Vader himself, General Vice, and also a Royal Guard champion. So these guys are pretty nasty enemies for the Rebels to have to contend with. The cards that have a backing like this would be your story mission cards. So this kind of provides some of the narrative color to each scenario. These guys right here represent side missions that you can explore, branching options away from the main scenarios. Right here we've got no less than 18 agenda cards for the Imperial player, things that you could attempt to accomplish within the scenario to get perks and whatnot. Sort of like Memoir 44 style, there's also 5 reference cards which you can keep on the table to, you know, as a heads-up reminder as to how some of the more important game's mechanics work. Also included in the game as well are a couple of skirmish mission cards, which basically give your head-to-head battles a little bit of flavor and objectives as well. What we've got here are the Rebel deployment cards, including the Rebel heroes such as Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Chewbacca. Of course, the fringe element in the galaxy is also represented in the game with their own deployment cards. The star of which in that deck is, of course, the deadly robotic bounty hunter IG-88. What we have here are the starting equipment cards and the branching special powers for 3 of the Rebel heroes. And here we have the matching loadouts for the other 3 Rebel characters. Don't feel too bad for the Imperial forces, because they also get these class cards as upgrades as well, which come in 3 different tiers of improvements. Just to make sure that battlefield conditions never stay too comfortable, you've got a whole bunch of command cards as well too, which can kind of shake up the current fighting situation. Sometimes characters can receive ill effects from combat, so things like being stunned or bleeding out, or even the positive effect of being focused. are represented handily on these cards, which you can use as an easy reference. The 12 card supply deck represents the sort of things that you might be able to find in any of the storage containers that are lying around, most of which very, very helpful, beneficial equipment. Now, more than just pretty shiny gold metal, these very, very handy reward cards can give you awesome equipment upgrades and special powers that can help you in the campaign. Well, basically, success at any given mission will allow you to gain credits, and credits can be used towards buying some pretty awesome equipment upgrades. They're available in 3 different tiers of improvements. So if you have a hope in hell of trying to take down the Empire, you're definitely going to want to invest some money in some of these fantastic upgrades. Here are the beautiful custom combat dice that come with the game. Of course, each different color of dice represents a better effectiveness with a certain weapon, whether it be in terms of like outright damage or things like your range as well too, which is indicated by this number here. You also have little surges as well too, which basically indicated by this little symbol right here. So much like in Descent, surges usually grant your weapons or your characters special additional buffs. One slight downside, the same plastic bases are used here in, as in other Fantasy Flight games, and these have a tendency to damage some of the tokens, particularly the door tokens. We've got the ID tokens here on the sticker sheet, which is basically used by the Imperial player to distinguish one squad from another squad. Here's what the tiles look like. I mean, they're absolutely fantastic. This is A17. And right here we've got B17. Again, various different terrain types represented here. Difficult terrain. We've got a little skyhopper here in this one, so a lot of like attention to detail. On the A27 side of the tiles, we've got what appear to be essentially an Imperial base interiors. We've got a docking bay and what looks to be a control room. On the flip side, more interiors as well. This looking decidedly dodgier, and this is the B27 side. The A37 tile has some exterior locations, including some water. We've got some storage crates as well too, as well as the temporary token representing General Vice, which of course will be represented later in an actual miniature. A couple of other exteriors here as well. On the A47 tile side, we see a couple of more what look like to be like Imperial bunker interiors. We've also got things like the Rebel entrance token. We've got some Rebel troopers here as well too. Down here are your damage tokens. On the flip side, more gorgeous art depicting different environments. Absolutely fantastic. Here on A57 we've got some smaller corridor pieces. We've also got a couple of the ID tokens again to keep track of your different squads. Diros Mercenary token, Luke, Han, Chewie. And the flip side, of course, just gives you a few more alternate options. A67's got a lot of the doors, the connector corridor pieces, also the all-important initiative token, your strain tokens, which your characters can max out to get certain special abilities. Again, just absolutely gorgeous art on these tiles. A lot of really important stuff on A77, including the threat/round dial, which you'll just put together. The Imperials will keep track of what their threat level is, which allows them to bring in reinforcements, and the round counter, of course, keeps track of scenario objectives and how much time's left. You also have in the mix as well, too, a whole lot of the damage and also the strain tokens. These control panels certainly come into play in Scenario 1, and you also have temporary cardboard counters as well too, representing things like the Royal Guards, Vader, and IG-88, of course. And here's the flip side for that same tile. And let's face it, this is what you guys really want to see, which is the amazingly detailed miniatures. Here are the Rebel hero figures, front side facing you. And reverse side, clearly you can see that these things are highly detailed and quite good candidates for painting as well too. The Imperial player gets 8 Stormtrooper figures, and here are 4 in various different positions. Also in the mix, 4 super cool detailed Royal Imperial Guards. Here are the E-Web engineers. These guys are just absolutely nasty in that first scenario. And here's a side view of the same figure. Commanding the Imperial forces, of course, are these three Imperial officer figures. And here are the incredibly formidable Imperial probe droids from 3 different angles. Forces of the Fringe basically represented quite well in the game as well, too. These are some Trandoshan mercenaries, basically the same race as Bosk, the bounty hunter from Empire Strikes Back. Truly, Fantasy Flight has not spared any expense at all. Here are some Nexu, some wild beasts that can come into play as well too. And I mean, it's just absolutely incredible how amazing these figures look. And then you've got this bad boy. The AT-ST figure is just superb. There's some assembly required, and it really does, needless to say, stand out on any of the campaign maps. When you see this thing appearing, then you know that shit's getting real.
Bonus feature.
Alright, let me show you the contents of the figure packs. First of all, this is what you get with Vader. You've got a really cool little scenario sheet here, which actually details no less than 2 scenarios, which is kind of expands the game experience right off the bat. Vader also gets 6 personal command cards, which is kind of a nice touch. Vader's also privy to 3 separate agenda cards, which can be played during the course of the game to kind of shake up game conditions. We've also got a couple of skirmish mission cards, which just basically summarize the win conditions of the Misasai Ruins skirmishes. And, you know, kind of a similar deal here for Luke. We've got a skirmish scenario here, which is Moisture Firm, and on the flip side we've got the Sympathy for the Rebellion mission. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of entertainment value here. We've got a nice exclusive little reward card here for Luke, which is called Ways of the Force. We've also got 6 command cards here exclusively for Luke, which allow him to throw a curveball at the Imperials. Here's the details on a side mission card, which is called Sympathy for the Rebellion. And here are a couple of summary cards for the Luke-related skirmish mission, which is called Moisture Farm. And of course, here's what we really wanted to see, are these absolutely amazing Vader and Luke figures, which once again are just ludicrously detailed. I think Fantasy Flight is smart in that sense that they're providing these figures in the initial box, because they're really showing people what to expect from future releases with these amazing figure packs. So, what did I think of
Star Wars Imperial Assault.
I'm really happy I bought it, actually. I am officially a convert. At the beginning, I wasn't quite sure. When I played through the scenario, there were a couple of things that I found a little bit wonky. The ability to move adjacent to an enemy is fine in a melee-based game like in Descent, but in a Star Wars game, which is primarily about firefights, it does kind of result in some kooky situations where you're basically like standing next to an opponent and firing at them at point-blank range, which is a little bit weird. The constant combat, too, that starts at the beginning of the scenario and doesn't let up until the end of the scenario can get a little bit wearing. But otherwise, so many good things to recommend here. You've seen the way the game looks. The production values are just top-notch. The Rebel forces and their Imperial foes thematically feel appropriate in terms of their on-screen counterparts. The first scenario, extremely easy to set up and get into, especially if you have played Descent before. It only took us really a couple of hours to play through that first scenario. The custom dice, which allow you to determine range and damage in one throw, really helps speed the game up. And the thing that I like most about the game for sure are the scenario objectives. The branching choices that you have within a given scenario really shakes things up. And when you link several of these scenarios together, that forms a persistent campaign that is incredibly epic and incredibly cool to play through. So, I really enjoyed Star Wars Imperial Assault, and I just want to say thanks a lot for watching. See you next time, and until then, game on!